Hi again, everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about the definition of emotional abuse. So, what is emotional abuse? Now, this is a bit of a sticky topic. A lot of people have different ways of describing it. So, how do you come up with a way to think about what it is that's useful to you so that you can use the definition, use your understanding of the definition to better make change in your life? So we're going to give you a few examples to flesh out the concept, but the main thing I'd like for you to know is a question, and that is the behavior you're doing harming your relationship, or is it helping your relationship? And if it's harming your relationship, then you can put it in the category of emotional abuse. Now, some people might say, well, what if I only do it once in a while? Or, it's only a little bit. It's true, there is a spectrum, and the intensity of the behavior makes a big difference. Obviously, very intense behavior is probably going to harm more. But even if you're doing some of the behaviors we're going to talk about a little bit or only occasionally, if they're harming your relationship, then those are behaviors that you want to change, right? So when we say we can stop being abusive, that's part of what we mean. If your partner feels that they're being harmed by your behavior, then that is what you must take seriously. So it kind of doesn't really matter the specifics. Is this particular behavior emotional abuse? Is that particular thing emotional? That is semantics. It doesn't really matter. If you're harming the relationship, then that's why you're here, right? Knowing that emotional abuse can occur in so many different ways is sometimes an intimidating place to start, but you're here because you're trying to get clear. And one of the ways we want to do that is by giving you some examples. So I want to ask Karen, when did you start to become aware of emotional abuse in your life? And would you mind sharing a little bit of that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few ways I became aware. The first one I already shared, which was seeing my own kind of mean comments that would come out in very occasionally in my relationships, but I realized it only takes one of those mean comments to really create some damage. And that's what led me to start looking into it. But one of the things that surprised me when I was learning about emotional abuse was learning that even just having an attitude of superiority and that you're always right and that your way is how things should be is emotionally abusive. And I recognized this because I had a roommate who really had a strong sense of that her way of organizing the house and living was the right way. Mm-hmm. And all of us that were in the house with her really had to conform to her way of living, or we would be on the receiving end of some kind of nasty response. And I didn't realize the impact of that until I actually left the house, because by the time I left the house, I was actually in fear most of the time. I didn't feel safe to eat food and just come and go and do my thing. I was constantly walking on eggshells and fearing, like in a fight or flight or fear response. So I recognized, wow, this has really taken a toll, and I started to feel bad about myself, that I was actually wrong or bad. And then the final thing that really sealed I don't know. Okay, the final way that I really recognized emotional abuse in my life personally was in another relationship. My ex and I, we ended up starting to have this fighting habit. And the way, there's a beautiful quote I've heard, fight nice. And we weren't fighting nice. And it wasn't until I heard about the Gottman Institute and the Four Horsemen that I realized what was really happening that was so unhealthy because I intuitively sensed it wasn't okay, but I wasn't sure. And the Gottman Institute is founded by John Gottman, and he did a bunch of research on couples, and he was able to determine with quite a lot of accuracy whether or not a couple would really last based on these four things. If one of the four things was present, it was a determinant of the failure of the relationship, or that the relationship was likely to go south. And the four things are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. We're going to put a really cute video that's so awesome below for you to check out that just summarizes it so well in a couple minutes. But when I heard those, I realized, oh, that's what me and this boyfriend were doing to each other, and how harmful that was, and the relationship did end.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those things. It's so helpful to hear real life examples, right? And so maybe I'll add a little bit of an example too from my relationship as well. I know that I was being emotionally abusive because, like Karen said, my husband became fearful of being around me. Whether it was my criticisms, blaming him, he could never get anything right, threatening that we wouldn't be romantic, or, just everything verbal, nothing physical, but things that were manipulative and mean. And you might think that, well, if I just say one mean thing to somebody one time, is that emotional abuse, right? People ask that a lot. And no, not necessarily. You say one mean thing, that doesn't necessarily mean you're being emotionally abusive, but it's not a good thing, right? You don't want to be mean at all, ever. But when it is chronic over time, even at a low level, that is definitely abusive, an abusive environment that, for example, I was creating in my marriage. If it's low grade and then there are these spikes, acute, like these temper tantrum, like outbursts, we call them a lot when we're talking privately. Like, I had another outburst, I just lost it, I was slamming doors, I yelled at the top of my lungs, the neighbors, the police came, thought it was like, those acute spikes can occur. Those are usually the things that people really recognize as emotional abuse, but the low grade stuff is also part of it. And it's actually rare to have only the acute parts. It's if you look closely, you'll probably see that in addition to any spikes that you probably have a low grade bunch of stuff happening as well. So those are some hopefully clear examples to help you know, first of all, you're not alone. There's a lot of different kinds of emotional abuse. It can come and go. It can be occasional. It can be frequent and constant. But the key point is, if you feel that by your behavior you are harming your relationship rather than helping it, then it's worth trying to stop it. Obviously, in order to stop being abusive, we need to have an understanding of what it is so that we can stop it. So that's why we've taken a little bit of time to open up the box of the definition of what emotional abusiveness is. It is a little bit slippery, but I want you to bear in mind that if you're here and you have answered the call to join this mini course, We Can Stop Being Abusive, it kind of doesn't matter specifically what you're doing. If you have behavior you want to change, then you're in the right place. Now, we're going to include, in order to support you more fully on measuring your behavior change, we're going to include a couple of assessments. They're very easy. Just print them out and circle the number. And if you do this now before going into the rest of the modules, that would be really cool, because by the end of the mini course, what we can ask you to do is to take the assessments again and see whether you've made any progress. That way you'll have a dashboard for yourself to be able to say, oh, see, I started this at a 5 and now here I'm at a 4 or I'm at 3.5, and that's really what we're aiming for. So go on ahead and click the links to do the assessments next, and we'll see you in the next video.